Appreciate Pastor John and the Oversight Committee for having us when we can come down and share with you in music. And today we want to look at the word love. What does it really mean? I've been given the moniker, if you will, by someone these last number of months of word nerd. And I take that kindly. It's meant kindly. Because I like to look into words and understand what they mean, and I share that with people. I think it's important to understand what words mean. And so it's a term of endearment, if you will, but it's not a word that I would use so much. But I like to do that. I find it necessary to do that. Today we're going to look at two forms of love, and a lot of what I'm sharing today has been pulled from various resources. But I came across a book from C.S. Lewis entitled The Four Loves not too long ago, and I ordered a few copies, and I've been reading through that. And he says in the beginning of this book, in the introduction, if you're familiar with Lewis, it's interesting. A number of years ago, my wife and I went over to Ireland in one of our journeys, and we went up to with a friend to tour a place outside of Belfast, northeast of Belfast, and it was the birthplace of C.S. Lewis. And there was a bookshop there, and the bookshop offered tours of his travels, I guess. And so we walked in, and Peggy probably remembers this. We walked in, and there was two older ladies. They were 60 plus, 70 plus, I'm not sure. They weren't kids. And we asked them for the section about C.S. Lewis, and they said, who? I said, C.S. Lewis, the guy that was born here that wrote a lot of stuff. They're like, we're not familiar with him. I'm like, you sell his stuff, and it's all here. But anyway, I just thought that was sort of comical that they had never even heard of him, and they were at a bookshop in his hometown that sold his things and offered tours of that. But he's a great writer and writes a lot of deep things. But he wrote something in The Four Loves in the introduction, and he says this. He says, we do violence to most languages, especially our own. What does that mean? We do violence to our language. We really kind of make a mess of things at times. We don't understand fully what a word means. Our modern English language has an interpretation of something that we accept, and it may be accurate in a lot of ways, but there are times when it isn't accurate, and times when it is so inaccurate it actually causes problems. There's a verse that it's not up on, I didn't put it on the PowerPoint, but Luke 14, you don't have to turn there, but it's a verse you might recognize or be familiar with, and it says this, Luke 14:26. It's Jesus speaking. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father, mother, wife, children, brother, sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. I've had a few people over the years say to me, they've come across this and said, how can I be interested in following a God who wants me to hate my family? Hate is not a word that is endearing to anyone, especially not a Christian or a follower of Jesus. I said, that's a good question. This was years back. This first came up in my realm of ministry. And so I spent time looking up as a word nerd. And I found in this context here, what that really means in simple terms is to love less than. The word hate means to love less than. We think of hate as I'm going to hit you, I'm going to be against you, I'm going to demonstrate to you that we're not friends. That's what we think of as hate. I hate you. We would never use that term to anybody. We should never use that term, right? But if I were to say to my wife, I don't really say it this way, but we've talked about it over the years, I love you less than the Lord, she wouldn't take offense to that, nor would I if she said that. But we would never say, I hate you. That's just one example of one word that is super important to understand the meaning of. Because if somebody were to read that and thought that God wanted them to be negative and evil and wicked towards their family, I wouldn't want to follow him either. So that's one word there that is really important. The word enmity, actually, more used in the King James, that's a word that denotes action. Enmity towards someone is actually, I'm going to take action. Hate really means I'm not going to love them as much as the object of my affection, which in this case is the Lord. So we're not looking at hate today, but I just wanted to bring that up because that's a prime example of a total misunderstanding of a word that actually causes people to reject even being interested in looking to God. because if he's going to tell me to hate my family in the ways we understand it, I don't want to be involved with that. So if a word like that, if a word like hate can be misinterpreted or misunderstood, what about the word love? What about that word? So what is love? What is that? When we say that, I love you, I love the Lord, Jesus, lover of my soul, what are we really looking at? And so some of the definitions I came across in studying is it's to feel something. People say sometimes, Christians, and they're a bit dogmatic in that they'll say, I know we're not supposed to go by our feelings and we're not supposed to really feel. I said, well, what are we supposed to do with them? They're real and they affect us. We can't just ignore them. God said, ignore your feelings. There are feelings there that need to be recognized and addressed. Love invokes a feeling. It manifests in a feeling. Love is to give something. Love at times is to give something. I express love by giving. We give things to people, right, as an expression of that. Love is also to belong to something or belong to someone. And we're going to look at that a little further in. Those who profess faith in Christ, those who say that Jesus is my Savior, we belong to the family of God. There's an act of love that precipitated that. To belong to someone. To know that we matter. Love is to know that we matter. To know that we matter. I've mentioned it here before, some things I hear, like any of us, and it really strikes me. And I share it sometimes and expect others to be, wow. And they're like, oh, that's nice, But something that Larry Crabb, one of my mentors, mentioned years back when he was asked about the definition of joy. And he was talking to a gentleman at a ski lift, and they were just talking in a conversation. Larry asked this gentleman about joy, and he said that joy is knowing the one you're with is glad to be with you. Just a simple statement. But that's part of what love is knowing the one you're with is glad to be with you. When I meet with people sometimes, this is not a trick question, but I'll go sit with them and I'll say, how do you think God sees you today? I don't even want to go there. A loser, a waste of space. He sees me as the worst of the worst. And I ask that because I want to assure them that he doesn't. That's not in fact. He loves them. He loves them. He enjoys being with them. He enjoys being with me even when I make a mess of things. That's hard for me to understand fully, and I don't try to fully understand it. I've learned and I'm learning to accept that. He's not only joyful to be with me when I'm getting it all right, which is not very often, or even when I'm getting it half right. He just likes being with me because I've accepted the offer of his son for salvation. So he loves that. That's enough for any of us. So I want to be joyful to be with him, knowing that he's joyful to be with me. And these are just simple words, but they're very impactful thoughts that we don't allow ourselves sometimes and don't allow others to enjoy. And I want us this morning to enjoy love from him, from each other, and have a little better understanding of what that looks like and the depth of it. I have a PowerPoint slide that gives the 4 loves according to Lewis from his book. The first one, I don't have the screen in front of me, so I apologize if hopefully you'll see what I'm seeing, or I'm going to be speaking what you're seeing. But the first is Storge. It's pronounced Storge, and it's an empathy bond. The second is Philia, which is a friend bond. We're going to define those and then go on to look at 2 of them. The third is Eros, which is a romantic love. And the fourth is Agape, which is unconditional God love. So on that slide still, I'm not sure if I spoke about it here. I think at my home church anyway, a number of years ago, we were looking at sympathy and empathy in the context of a message. And they are compound words. Sympathy, the SYM is symbiotic. It's just sort of being with someone when they're hurting. Pathy is to walk with them. So sympathy is to join with someone while they're walking, presumably hurting or something like that. Empathy, the EM, is to enter in. So we are actually entering into their lives and struggle. When Paul says in Galatians 6 to carry one another's burdens, that's part of what we're doing. We're entering in. We're more than just feeling sorry for them and offering maybe some help. We're actually taking a step to walk with them. So storge love is an empathy bond. It's where we actually are with someone and they know it and we know it, and we're walking this life together. Words, again, can only go so far in explaining this, but some of you sitting here, hopefully will flash through your minds people that you have a storge bond with. We don't call it that, but a bond that's more than just a friendship. Now, ideally, that would be in our blood family, but without getting too theological into things, the fall of man has messed all that up in the sense whereby it's not as it was intended to be, so we don't always have that. We don't always have a deep love with our blood relatives. In fact, sometimes we have a lot less than that. But I would suggest to you that we need that. We actually have to have that. And as we look through here today and before we go today, I'm going to urge you to find that if you don't have it. It's a lonely road, to say the least, without that. We certainly need it with the Lord, but we need it with people as well. The philia love, we get if you know Philadelphia, it's called the city of brotherly love, and that's really what that is. Philia love is brotherly love. And that's Philadelphia, that's the name, comes from that. And that's not what the city represents, obviously, like any city, but that's what the name represents. So really, that's more of a friend bond, as it says. That's an acquaintance, somebody we see, somebody we get along with, might, spend time with, and those sorts of things. And then eros is romantic love. As it describes, that's really between a husband and wife, primarily. And then agape love. Unconditional God love. So those are the four loves that Lewis points out. Some writers would point out 7. You can get really into a lot of parsing of things, but I like those 4, and if you get a chance to read his book, The 4 Loves, you'll see them articulated in there quite well. So today we're going to be focusing on the storge and the agape, those two. I have another slide. Regina, if you would flip it. It's from Strong's Lexicon, which is a definition of words, if you will. It says, it defines love as cherishing one's kindred, especially parents and children, the mutual love of parents and children and wives and husbands, loving affection, prone to love, loving tenderly, chiefly, on the reciprocal tenderness of parents and children. Those of you who are parents know this, or should know this, or hopefully know this. There's nothing that can break that. There's nothing that can get in the way of that. It's a bond that has been created and is not broken and not to be broken. I meet with a lot of people. Over the years, I've met with a lot of men and women struggling with addictions primarily, but not exclusively. That's what I do. Primarily meet with men and women struggling with addictions, but over the years, it's certainly branched out into other areas of people struggling. But sometimes people will say to me, my wife and I don't have children, and they say, well, those people you meet with are just like your children. And I appreciate that. I do appreciate that response because there is a deeper affection than just friends. But I had somebody say to me, I forgot who it was now, but it wasn't very long ago. They said to me, I don't think it is actually the same. It was a parent. And they said, I think there's something different to actually being a parent. And I said, I appreciate that. And I agree with you. As desperately as I would love to have that, it's not the same. But yet it's pretty close. The love, the extension of walking through life with people is part of what is here. And some examples that I read from an author about family love, that storge love in the Bible. I don't have this on a slide, I don't think. But it's looking at Noah, the mutual love and protection among him and his wife. You know, they were alone, if you will, for that time period when God flooded the earth. And the love of Jacob for his sons, you pick up on that. And then Martha and Mary for Lazarus. There was a great, deep, desperate almost plea to God for help. So when a person is a follower of Jesus Christ, they enter into the family of God. We are welcomed in. I use a drawing with people at times. I don't think I've shown it here. It's a very basic drawing because I'm not an artist. I didn't put it on the PowerPoint, but it's just a circle over here that has an orphanage written in there, and then a circle over here that has the adopted home, and then draw a line between the two. And what happens, and maybe some of you have never heard this or thought of it this way, but we are born because of the sin of Adam into the orphanage. All of us are. I don't really like that as a human. I don't really think that's fair as a human in my limited capacity. But that's the truth and reality, and I accept that. And God sent his son. They called him Jesus. We sang that. So he walks that chasm over to the orphanage and says, I'd like you to come with me. And we have that opportunity to say, I will do that. You have that opportunity this morning. Any time of any day, you have that opportunity if you haven't done that. And what he does is he then walks with us across that chasm into the adoptive home. That's the family of God. That storge love now has an opportunity to exercise itself in that is now a family. We are a family. And it's incumbent upon us who are professing believers who have been around for a while to teach that person how to live in this new place because they don't know. And I can't tell you how many families I encounter. I'm not surprised. I'm saddened. They expect that if and when their loved one professes faith, they're going to stop doing wrong and now do right. And in a perfect world in which we don't live, that would happen maybe. But that's not the case. All that has happened is they have taken that walk from the orphanage to the adoptive home and are now part of the family of God. But there's something stronger than just living in the home together. There is a spiritual connection that has taken place. Something we can't really see. We can't tell anybody, well, here's how it looks, you know. But what we can do is demonstrate it in how we react to one another. Again, going back to some of the definitions, letting them know that they matter. Far too many Christians I know, their sort of goal was to be the arbiter of proper behavior with anyone, really. And they sort of taken it upon themselves to be the judge of what people should do, should not do. And I realize we are to hold each other accountable. But I think my experience, I don't think I know, because I'm witness to it, far too many people take far too many things upon themselves to tell people rather than seek the Lord for the ability to love them as best they are able with God's equipping. Paul says this in Ephesians 4. So, again, it's important. This isn't a word nerd thing. It's a Bible nerd thing. But Paul's letters, typically, they're cut in two almost. His epistles, particularly Galatians, Ephesians, Colossians, Philippians, you can split them right down the middle by chapter. Romans chapter 12 starts the second section, right? And, Romans 12, Paul says, therefore I urge you to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God, right? He says, therefore. So therefore is the first 11 chapters of Romans. And that is all that God has done for us So Romans 12 starts, here's now what you should do for God. Well, Ephesians the same. First couple of chapters about what God has done in offering his love, extending his love. And he says, therefore, since God has done this on your behalf, since God has sent his son to come get you, rescue you out of this orphanage and bring you into this new place, the family of God, this new home, I, Paul, a prisoner, he was imprisoned at this time, literally, beg you, he says, I beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling. For you have been called by God. Always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Make every effort to keep yourselves united in the Spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. I would suggest that when he says, because of your love, these things you will do. If you're thinking about this any this week or later, that word stays with you or not, storge, do I have that? Because if you don't have that, you're not going to act this way he's urging you to do, for us to do. You can't just suck it up and be nice to people because God says you should. It's not going to last. And it's apparent to the other person. It's obvious to them that it's not real. He says, I beg you, I beg us to know what that love is like and to ask God for the ability to have it. Bearing with each other, making allowance for each other's faults. That's condoning what they do. It's not. It's not up to us to point out everything to everybody that's wrong. It's not even our right. And we're not really good at that. Looking past things isn't accepting them. It's just understanding what is in our control, power, and in our authority. So what does God offer? What kind of love does he offer? I have a slide defining agape love. It's selfless, sacrificial, and unconditional. It's the highest of the four types of love. So one of the definitions, I don't have this on the slide, I don't think. They're frequently found throughout the New Testament, but rarely in non-Greek literature, non-Christian Greek literature. So agape love isn't written about except things directly relating to God. Agape love describes the kind of love Jesus has for his Father and for his followers. There's a man, Bernard of Clairvaux is what he's known as, his moniker. He was an abbot in a French monastery in the 12th century, I believe. And he wrote a lot. He was Augustine. Some of the early fathers of the faith, if you will, referenced him from time to time. He was a notable writer. And he wrote several books. But one of them that I excerpt, I have an article excerpted that I read from time to time in reference. He calls it the 4 degrees of love. According to Bernard, I don't put this up. You don't necessarily have to write it, but he says that the 4 degrees are, the first degree is that we love ourselves for our sake. And that's really sinful man. We just want what we want. Lust, sinful man. The second is we love God for our sake because he now is helping me. I like that. And that's not a bad thing. It's a level we get to. The third level, Bernard says, is that we love God for his sake. We're starting to actually get a glimpse into who God is, not just what he can do for me. And then Bernard says that he defines the fourth level as loving ourselves for God's sake. No, we're not supposed to love ourselves. We're just supposed to give ourselves and serve. I would suggest that that's not the end. He wants us to, I said to someone not too long ago about learning to love ourselves, and they said, well, I don't really know if that's true. And I said, well, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. And Bernard of Clairvaux isn't the Holy Scriptures, but he's suggesting that. Learning to love ourselves. Well, what Bernard says, the reason I wanted to bring that up was Bernard says that nobody walks in that fourth level. We just sort of drift into it from time to time where we actually are happy with who we are and where we are. And we might live there for a week or a month or a couple of days or whatever it might be. But I think in the same way, when we think about agape love, we aren't really capable of giving it. We can say we love unconditionally, but I'm not sure. We might have moments where we drift into that and we literally accept anything someone is doing and we resist our instinct to feed back something that may or may not be helpful or true. But God is capable of that at all times and actually demonstrates that at all times. So what do we do with that? How do we work out these things in our lives today? If we agree that these four loves are good definitions and we want to look at them more and investigate that more and not just say love, I just love. What does that really mean? Well, if you ask the Lord, or if you can recognize today somebody in your life, hopefully more than one, but somebody that you really care about, and or it may or may not be the same person who you know really cares about you, that's storage A love. That's what that is. Something inside that echoes, that resonates with us, that lets us know that. And maybe it is important to talk with someone about that and let them know the depth of that. I've had some occasions to express those things, and I've said to some people, sorry if I sound kind of mushy here. I just want to let you know how much I appreciate you and how much I appreciate who you are and what you represent and the way you conduct your life and things like that. But if you have that, or if you recognize that a bit, there's a couple of things I would urge you to do. To cherish it, to understand the value of that. You don't need me to drive you around, but I could drive you around throughout the course of my day and show you, sadly, just in my small circle of influence in Stauros, individuals who have no one. It might be their own fault, their own behavior, whatever the case may be. It doesn't matter to me what has brought them to that place. What saddens me is that they don't have it. And so one of our goals is to find that. And that can be a multi-year process, if you will. But to cherish it when you have it or find it. And then to nurture it. And that does require sacrifice oftentimes. To nurture those relationships. To work on them, to learn about them. I'm not real good at that. I cry out to the Lord to help me with that. Because I so desperately want to do that. I desperately believe the importance of it. I see the need for it. Because I know I want that as well. I want to know that I matter. Not people to come and tell me I matter. I just want to know that I do. And I want you to know that as well, from whomever it might be. And as a church family, certainly with each other, taking the time and then maintaining that. Maintaining that. Cherishing it. Recognizing it, cherishing it, nurturing it, maintaining it. It takes work. The fall of man has made it such that these things don't just happen. We have to work at them. Agape produces a feeling we have, an assurance. We sang, and because he lives, this calm assurance. I can face uncertain days because he lives. It's not really, I don't walk out, the Lord is with me, I'm going to attack this day, like that doesn't really happen, sadly. I wish it did. I sort of have to convince myself with the Lord's help that I'm ready to go out and face the day. But yet I do and can, mostly. Right, so it is a calm assurance. If somebody were to ask you, explain to me that, it's hard to explain unless you have it. But when you have it, it's important to recognize it and let the Lord know how much we value it. We were at my home church last year, or earlier this year probably, I forget now. Anyway, I was sharing a message, and we were talking about the depth of relationship that we have, and we were just looking at some of the definitions of something seeking to our innermost being. Storge love and agape love need to be sort of settled in our innermost being. They need to be things that affect us. They should be things that affect us. If they're not affecting us, they're probably not what Lewis is talking about, what the scriptures talk about, and what we're looking at this morning. If you're here this morning, and we're going to have 2 more slides to look at, but if you're here this morning and you don't know the agape love, I really can't help with the storge love this morning. You'll have to work that out as you live life. But ask God for help with that, to find people, to recognize that. You might already have it and never really placed the value of it or saw the value of it. I would ask you to do that and then do those things. Cherish it, nurture it, work on some maintaining it. But the agape love is part why we meet on these Sundays at any church, really, any gathering, is to let you know that the Lord is here. Essentially, he's sent his son from the family of God. This church is not the family of God. It's a church building. The people here are the family of God. So he didn't necessarily send him to this building, although for our purposes this morning, he sent him here to be among us today, to ask any of you that haven't taken that walk with him yet, not the walk to North Point Baptist Church, but the walk into the family of God, which is what salvation is. And that opportunity is around you anytime, but it certainly is available this morning. In just a few moments, the gentlemen are going to come up and sing a song, and it'll be an opportunity for you maybe to take that walk literally up here, or figuratively. You can stay where you are. Maybe you're a Christian and you need some deeper connections, and whatever the case may be, something has caused that not to be real in your life. I would ask you to ask God to help, to bring connections into your life that are meaningful, to recognize them, and then to work at them. But I want to close with 2 slides. There's a quote from C.S. Lewis from the Four Loves book, and I think it might be 2 slides, Regina, I'm not sure, but he says, perhaps an analogy may help as he's talking about this journey we're on. Do you see that? Is that up there? Let's suppose that we are doing a mountain walk to a village, which is our home. Okay, we're taking a walk. At midday, we come to the top of a cliff where we are in space, very near to our destination because it is just below. We can see it down there on top of a mountain looking down at where we want to be. We could drop a stone onto it, but as we are not mountain climbers, so we can't go down that way, we must go a long way around, maybe many miles. At many points during the detour, we shall statistically be farther away from the village than we were when we saw it above the cliff. But only statistically, in miles terms. In terms of progress, we shall be far nearer our destination. In other words, things seem so far away at times, but yet so near. And we say, Lord, why are you taking me over here? I thought I was supposed to be over there. And part of what we need to learn to trust is that this is part of the pathway to get there, even though in human terms it seems like it's a detour or out of the way. Now, we need to recognize Satan can detour us as well. Not every single detour we take is God ordained and from the Lord, but we also need not assume that when our goals and things aren't happening and other things come up, we must be erring. It may be that we're doing that journey that's called life. And then I think it's the last slide or 2 from Lewis. Hence, as a better writer has said, he's saying better than him, our imitation of God in this life, that is our willed imitation, as distinct from any likeness which he has impressed upon our nature or states, must be an imitation of God incarnate. Our model is the Jesus, not only of Calvary, but he, as Lewis says, of the workshop, the roads, the crowds, the clamorous demands, surly oppositions, the lack of peace and privacy, the interruptions. For this so strangely unlike anything we can attribute to the divine life itself. This isn't what we expected. All of these detours and oppositions and surly people. It is apparently not only like, but is the divine life operating under human conditions. What does that mean? I'll close with this. I was at a seminar, a 10-day-long workshop with Larry Crabb down in North Carolina a few years back. And he lectured 5-6 hours a day for 9 of those days, I guess. So he provided lots of information, and we went through lots of material. But at the end, he did what he called a timeline of blessing. And I won't get into all that. It was quite an exhaustive timeline that we marked in our books and things. But he closed up this great time of School of Spiritual Direction was what it was called. So he finished up this 10 days of, it was 30 of us sequestered, if you will, at Billy Graham's complex down there. He says, we live in a fallen, crappy world and bad things happen. And I thought, all that for that? What he's trying to say is what Lewis, in a sense, is saying here. We're living life, trying to honor God, and the roads change. We get into crowds that we're not familiar with. There are clamorous demands, people demanding our attention, yelling for things, wanting more of us than we can give. Surly oppositions, the lack of peace and privacy, interruptions when we don't need it, don't want it, don't expect it. Jeff and I were talking about some of that this morning in a way. Lewis is suggesting that's actually the divine, capital D, life operating in this world. So we are enabled by God to exercise, practice, and have storge love irregardless of all of that. We can have that. Well, John, you don't understand. I have too much stuff going on. I don't know. I can't answer everything for you. What I can say to you is that God has provided a way to have what he's offering nonetheless. And then maybe you're like me with Agape Love, and because I was, Jeff, if you and Justin want to come on up, we'll share a song in a minute here. But if you're like me, and at age 13, I started taking drugs, and then by 16, I was heavy into all kinds of hallucinogens and barbiturates and everything under the sun. And when I was 24, I tried to take my life on the second occasion. That was the second time I proactively tried to take my life. And I cried out to God because I was raised in church, and I said, help me, but why would you? So I went another 9 years still living that way, thinking that I had gone beyond and was still beyond what he could forgive and would forgive. Even though I was told by people around me differently, it just didn't hit me. But then one day it did. And again, I would have loved that my life would have changed on that day to where I didn't do wrong any longer. I'm not sure I thought that would happen, but maybe I had a bit of an illusion. But I am so grateful, well, to my wife, because those first 6 years was, because of my behavior, a disaster. Then we got saved, both of us, at the same time. But then she still had to make a decision, which the Lord prompted, to stay with me, because she wasn't going to, and she's not a person to throw out words. So that went on to produce love and show love. And again, she's not going to tell you, and I'm not, but she would say to you that I don't get it right a lot. But hopefully more right than not than it used to be. So on this road, this is the road. We're not still looking for this thing. We have the thing. It's called salvation. And the Father's love is so deep for us. He desires so much that each of us here today have that. They're going to sing a song, How Deep the Father's Love for Us. Again, the words will be on the screen, but you don't really need to sing along. You can, certainly. You can stay seated. This is a time for you to maybe say, Lord, I need some of that storge, a word I've never really thought of or heard. I need that in my life. Maybe you're here today and you say, Lord, I need that agape love. I need that love that I don't deserve. And I'm not even sure why you would give it to me. But I'm here to tell you, the scriptures say so, not me, that that's what he's offering. No matter what you've done, what you're doing today, no matter what you're doing today, no matter what you're thinking. I'm amazed that the thoughts can go through my head at church. Where did that come from? I'm in church, But that's what happens. Those are the roads that Lewis talked about. Yep, that's part of the journey. Accept that it is part of the journey, effort to change, but accept the love. And then secondly, that we offer it to others. We offer, as best we are able to offer unconditional love, we do that for others.